Hello all, Alison here and welcome back to Words and Pictures for another few minutes of fun. This is a little introduction to a thing I do very often. This is upcycling, recycling old jars into candle lanterns. It's a thing I love to do. It's a thing I've done from very, very early on, from my very earliest crafting days to very, very recently using my little last year's festive minis from Paper Artsy to create a lovely warming hot toddy kind of candle jar. Obviously it's a wonderful thing for Halloween, so you get amazing silhouettes when the candles are lit. I'm afraid you're gonna have to wait till the very end for a money shot of all these candle jars lit up. That's using die cuts and kind of really, when you see this lit, it's amazing because these mixed media effects in the background create real beauty. Some of these are done with as simply as some Tim Holtz tissue papers, collage papers that make amazing glowing lanterns, because of course the paper is see-through or translucent, not quite see-through but translucent, so you get an incredible glow from those. Or of course, as I did here, you can decorate your own tissue paper or tracing paper. Those are my cornflower stamps from Paper Artsy, done like that. Or you can use die cuts, as I've done here, along with some quotes, obviously from my set called Light and Dark, Light and Darkness. Darkness and Light, it's called. Darkness and Light. It's one of the very early quote sets that I did, so I've forgotten the name. Look at how a single candle can both defy and define the darkness. That's Anne Frank. Every hour of the light and dark is a miracle, Walt Whitman. And lots of layered die cuts on there, but again, that mixed media background. And if you'd like to see the mixed media background being made, love this one, the crow, and then taking off. Raven, of course, he is. Halloween, little spooky haunted houses. These ones where I was experimenting with creating a kind of tin type effect for the houses, and again, when they're lit, they are just magical silhouettes. They stay out for the whole of autumn because they're just great. More, that's a very old On the Edge Tim Holtz die cut around there with some leafy ones, and yes, that's where we're headed today. So by the time you watch this, hopefully you may have seen on Instagram or even on my blog the guest spot I'm doing for Simon Says Stamp, inspired by the mood board created for that challenge. And this is where we're headed with this poor little blank jam jar here. So yeah, we're onto those autumn leaves we made the other day. I'll link to that autumn leaf cutting video if you'd like to see it. But I thought, since I'm really happy with how this one turned out, and since we're probably going to visit candle lanterns more than once on A Few Minutes of Fun, I'd invite you along for doing the second of these little jars. So I'm going to get myself ready with the supplies I need to create this autumnal beauty. And yeah, I hope you enjoy the fun, and do come back at the end and I will light all these up. I'm going to have to wait for it to get dark for that, because otherwise there's no point. I'm going to clear the decks and I'll be back in a sec. Ready to play. One of the joys with these candle lanterns is you really can go as simple or as complicated as you like. And for this one, I'm keeping it relatively simple. I'm going to use some of this gorgeous Tim Holtz collage paper. This is one of the ones that was a Halloween edition. Mostly, I mean, I just think it's beautiful. Not Halloween to me, it's just full of beautiful imagery. And yeah, I guess some of these advertisings are for undertakers, that's why. But really, I don't find this spooky in any way, shape or form. However, given the mood board I'm playing with and given how autumnal it is, I decided I really didn't want this big red flower in the middle of everything. I do want the furry branches. They're not really fir branches, but some of the inspiration on the mood board was fir branches for this. This is October 2024, I'm guessing for Simon Says Stamp. And I'll link things in the description below so you can find that blog post and you can find that challenge post. If you're in time, you might even be able to play along. But that red flower is not in the mood board. It's not in my mood at the moment. I want this autumnal leafy thing going on. So what I decided to do was quite simply take it out, and I'm going to replace it with some other tissue, and you'll see that's really quite easily done, because as this tissue paper is so deliciously thin and translucent, it's quite easy to layer it up without it taking the eye that that's what you've been doing. That's exactly what I've done here. Where is the extra layered bit? Here's the extra layered bit, just kind of layered in with some extra greenery over there. So let's put this onto the slightly smaller jam jar. Quite often when I'm doing this, I like to create in a couple of different sizes, because it looks really lovely when it's standing on a shelf, or actually as stand on the wood burning stove when it's not lit. So that just gives that variation of size. It means you can work with a sort of variation in size of leaf that I'm going to add, and just gives everything a nice higgledy-piggledy look instead of being too orderly. If you're somebody that likes to work nice and orderly, by all means do. So here we go. Tissue paper is going to wrap around the jar. It's seriously as simple as that. And sometimes I take it right up to the top, and I just kind of live with the crinkle effect that you get if you wrap it in around the top. But for these, what I decided I would do was give them a bit more of a border around the top. So I've used some design tape up there for the sort of finishing touch. So I only want to take it this far up, which means I'm going to have lots of lovely tissue paper to keep and use somewhere else. And I'm just going to cut an approximate height for that. I'm not going to overly worry about getting it completely the right height. It's sort of along there-ish. So I'm eyeballing this. By all means, if you're somebody that enjoys measuring or wants things very, very precisely achieved, then go ahead and measure to make sure you've got exactly the right height of tissue paper. But I'm going to be able to trim this and tweak it later on, so it's really no problem. That's given me ample. Make sure you cut too much rather than too little if you're eyeballing, because trimming is easy. Adding on is not that difficult. And that's going to go around approximately to there. Again, I'm going to cut more than I know I need, because I can always trim it afterwards, and we'll fill in that little gap in a minute when we've glued this on. For this, you can use pretty much any kind of acrylic glue. Of course, the Tim Holtz Collage medium. I just happen to have out some of my golden regular gel, and this is the gloss one. And I tend to use the gloss one for these sort of underneath things, because I don't want glossy glue showing up in other projects. So whenever I've got something where I know it's never going to show, this is the glue I tend to use up at that point. So it's just a little craft brush, very easy. And I'm going to put on a little layer of this. I might not put the glue on all the way around to start with, because it's, if you want to control the tissue paper going on straight, you can use tissue paper, you can use tracing paper, you can use other kinds of decorative paper. If you've got patterned tissue paper, for instance, you can get all kinds of metallic tissue papers these days just as wrapping paper. And so you could get some wrapping paper and make some very quick, simple little gifts in quite an easy way. Just some ribbon or some twine around the top. So I've gone about so far, yay far. Need a little bit more glue, and I only really need to go around the top of this bit because I've got my trimmed out hole, which I'm going to fill in a minute. I'm going to put a little bit more around the bottom here so that I can just kind of fold that bottom edge in, tuck it in. It'll give me, again, nice creasy little bits of texture. If you want a little bit of extra sealing on this for protection long term, by all means, do another little coat of medium, the glue, whatever you're using, on top, because that will seal this paper nicely in terms of making sure it's got longevity. Of course, if I do that with my gloss, I'm going to have a really glossy jam jar lantern, which I'm not sure I really want. But not to worry. I'm not going to seal it just at the moment, but if sealing is something you think is going to be useful in the longer run, by all means do that. So you see what I mean about things not being straight? Completely fine at the moment. I can still round the bottom, just put in a little bit of extra and paint in that little creased texture at the bottom. Going to add in this little hole in a minute. Round the top here, I do want it a little neater, so I'm just going to trim round. And you see how easy that is. Just take the scissors round at the height that it should be. Or, as I say, if you're somebody that likes to get these things done in advance, by all means, trim and measure to start with. But I've always been a sort of eyeballer. And I'd rather just get on and start, because the more I faff around with measuring things and cutting things, the more likely it is that I'll just sort of pause and go and find something else to do. Because those aren't the bits that delight me. They may be the bits that delight you. I'm just going to tuck a bit of glue in round here so that, again, I can allow that tissue to just smooth into the neck of the jar. Because I'm going to be putting design tape round here, I'm not terribly faffed about getting this really, really neat and tidy. It's all going to get covered up around that top ridge. So we need a little bit to fill in this gap here. If you're using tissue paper where the whole design is going on, this won't be an issue for you, but let's just fill it in. I think I quite like those little leaves. I think I might invite those leaves along to the party. So I just need, I don't need much, do I? So I could trim up around, and that's going to get me a nice little bit of extra text. Always love a bit of text. And because there are books and things in the mood board, that also fits in. So I'm going to layer this into here, a little bit of glue. Simple to do. And now I'm rhyming. You know it's one of those days, don't you? When the automatic rhymes come out. There we go. And because it's a collage paper, the images and the text are collaged together already. The fact that I've collaged in an extra little image, a bit of imagery, and the extra little bit of text just means that I've got an extra bit of collage detail. You'd really never, your eye won't be drawn. By the time we've got our wire and our beautiful autumn leaves, it's all going to look splendid. So gluey brush into the water, always, so that we don't glue up our bristles. And as you can see, I've got my tray of autumn leaves. We made those just a couple of weeks ago. I'll link that video as well in the bottom. So I'm going to want some of those. As you can see here, for this one that I've already made, I really wanted the backs of the leaves to have a bit more colour. I don't know if you can see around there, the back of that leaf, the back of these leaves, because they are going to show. And so lots of these leaves weren't coloured on the back. So I just did a really quick little bit of spritzing. You can see the outlines here, and that's given me another piece of background paper. I've got a few more picked out that I might use for this, but I think also I'd quite like maybe some oak leaf shaped ones. You're already, well, you're not quite both sides, so I want that one. I maybe want a slightly smaller one involved, so I need the back of that coloured. I might want one of these filigree ones. They're rather beautiful, aren't they? Or maybe we'll go with you as another oak leaf one, and maybe I want a sort of roundish shaped leaf. Oh, we've got a tattered leaf available for this. Ah, there's a nice round leaf. I think I want that probably a bit more colour in all sorts of ways. So simple as, let's pop that down there. Couple of extra little spritzes, exactly as we were doing the other day, so that my the back sides of the leaves just get a bit of colour. So that's Vintage Photo. This is Jack-o'-lantern, the Mica stain. So that's going to give us a bit of shimmer even on the backs of the leaves. And if you're talking about candlelight, having a bit of extra shimmer is always going to be a joy. That one I want to turn over and get a bit more colour onto the front as well. Ooh, see how full on when it's by itself. I'm just wiping the nozzle of my mica stain, because with that sparkly powder in there, it's liable to get overexcited and clog up the nozzle. So I'm just going to let those dry while I get on with the next little bit of, oh, look how beautiful that is. Those inky patterns as they peel away from the paper. Lovely. Good. And there was nothing particularly precious about the patterns on the other sides of these, so I'm fine if some of the ink leaks underneath. So set those aside while I get on to just adding a little bit of design tape around the top of here. So the one I chose to use, again, has got sort of book text ideas in it. That was another thing in the mood board. The autumn leaves, the sort of fir branch look, candlelight. I mean, as soon as I saw candlelight, I knew that was going to be in my mix. It was going to be candle jars, and they were glass spectacles. So again, as soon as I saw the glass spectacles next to the candlelight, that was a candle lantern for me. That's a glass jar and a candle lantern. So this is going to be a little bit wonky because we're putting straight design tape onto the curve of the neck here. So I'm going to do one that goes sort of around the lower part on the curve of the glass, and then I'm going to put another one that's going to take us around the actual screw part of the jar lid. So it's a question of embracing that additional creased texture. You're never going to get it to be completely flat because it's going onto a curve, but it's just enjoying that sort of gnarly, grungy look of that. And as well, we're going to have leaves and we're going to have beautiful black wire. So the black wire was inspired by the umbrella. It's a beautiful picture of an umbrella, a clear umbrella made of a black metal frame. And again, as soon as I saw that, I was, oh, that's black wire, that is. So that's going around the top there. Tuck it in if you've gone over the edge. If not, just smoothing it down. If you want to put a little bit of extra adhesive or a little bit of extra glue onto these design tapes, you might just help with the longevity. But if you smooth it in nicely, you really should be fine with that. So that's putting that away. I've mixed and matched these design tapes, so I have no way of knowing whether that particular tape originally came out of that particular box, I'm afraid. But yeah, there are a variety of sets of design tapes, some of which I think, if not all, are being discontinued, so grab them now. That's all still drying. I'm getting slightly tacky fingers as I do that, but that's fine. Simple as, onto the wire. There it is. I can't see it because it's lying right in front of me. So I vary what goes around the tops of these jars. Sometimes I use twine, sometimes I use nothing at all. Sometimes you can use ribbon. There's some with some raffia. Again, you'll get another look at those when I light them all up at the end. But it's, again, sort of simple as wrapping it round. I think with home decor, particularly if you're making gifts, keeping things simple so that it's not going to take hours and hours and hours of your time can be a really helpful production mode. So I'm just wrapping round, wrapping round. You may have noticed there's a little gap in my tissue here. I think I'm going to have leaves dangling down over it, but if I end up not having leaves dangling down over it, I might go so far as to add a little bit of extra tissue there just to cover up that little gap where it tore a little bit. So I'm leaving enough to come back round to here. As I trim it, I'm going to make sure I hold on to it because wire has a tendency of just kind of undoing itself. And then I'm just twisting that to join it. If you're worried about sticking holes in yourself, by all means use a little pair of twisty pliers, a little tool. But I mean, you know how I like inky fingers. Sometimes I have holy fingers because I've stuck little pinpricks through myself. As long as the wire isn't rusty, chances are you won't do yourself very much damage. I am kind of inclined to just put a little bit of that there. So I'm going to do it in the simplest of possible ways. I'm using my finger to apply the glue to the exact spot I want it. And I'll add just that little bit of greenery. That's going to be more than enough to cover up the little gap there. And again, in terms of collaging, once it's on, you'd never even know there was ever a gap. Grand. So I now need some little bits of wire to create my little handle, which I rather loved on this one. So I'm going to go for just a loose measurement to work out how much I need, something like that. And then I want that 3 times over. So 1, 2, that's about, yeah. And I need a little bit extra just for wrapping into the other wires. So trim that. Again, nothing precise about what I'm doing, you can see. But again, complete permission if you're somebody that likes measuring and getting things exact and precise, by all means do it. Even as I'm folding it into 3, I'm not being very precise about that either, because I want it kind of random and loose and fun, and it doesn't have to be a stressful process in any way, shape or form. So there's a little 3-way wire. Give it a little twist to just hold on to it. And that's going to be a nice height. So all I have to do now is find a little place where the wire is sticking up a little bit. And if I want a front to my jar, I might want the handle going sort of sideways onto that, if I don't particularly mind, which on this, I don't think I do particularly mind, because this is a smaller design. My leaves are probably going to go here so they don't cover up too much of my greenery. So between the leaves and the greenery, I don't really mind which way around this goes. I might even borrow these bits here. Since they're here, I can use them to fasten in this little side. I'm going to trim those in a minute, unless I can get them. Well, do they even need trimming? Love this knobbly bit here, very happy with that. So on this side, that might need a little bit of extra fastening. Let's see as we go. I've found out I can pick this up by the handle. Perfectly easy to pick it up by the handle, but if you're worried your handle's a bit fragile, then just pick the jar up by the jar. This side, what I'm going to do is do what I did on the other one, which is find somewhere where the wire is sticking out a little bit. There will always be somewhere. There will always, that one. I'm going to be able to get under that one. I'm going to slide my handle underneath there and then just invite that back down and loop it back up over the top. Yeah, and when those wires start coming up, you just say, no, thank you. I'd like you to stay down there. Another little twist of that around there, and you're done. I'm really enjoying that black wire. This is just garden wire from the hardware store or a garden store. It's garden wire intended for fastening plants to things or tying up bits of broken fencing. And it's also the same wire that I use sometimes for fastening things like sweet peas to trellis. Leave it there for the summer season and you bring it back in and it's all beautifully rusted, and then you've got rusty wire. If you get the coated ones of these, then that's not going to happen, of course. So there's my basic candle jar, but given that one of the chief bits of inspiration was autumn leafiness on this, obviously I want some autumn leaves, and I've got them ready to go, as I often do at this time of year. Let's see, where do we want them? Again, I'm just going to have a little play with how and where I might want these leaves to sit. I quite like that beautiful golden one, or do I want it a bit darker now that it's nice and dark? Oh, I think I like that, because that gives me that lovely shimmery one with a slightly darker shadow around it. So I think they might go there. Or do I want to fasten them sort of so that they are in connection with that greenery here? Maybe they want to go on the side of the handle, just to create that sort of pattern. No, I think I like them. I think I like them exactly where I said, sort of over those gates. So this is as simple again as I'm going to create a bit of texture by crinkling them up. That's why we put colour on the back as well. Create that lovely sort of leafiness. I might give a little bit of extra inking right around the edges just to give them some definition. I did this to some of the leaves as I was going in the video the other day, but otherwise you can always add it as you use them. And I'm going to, again, look for a little bit that's sticking up so that I can see I can slide it in. So it's really attached to the jar. That's going to go there. But then, of course, it is about glue. So just a little bit of craft glue on the back side. I don't want to glue the whole thing down flat. If you want to glue the whole thing down flat, by all means do. This is all about creative decision making. What's the thing that makes me happy as I do this? Do I want to slip it through a bit of wire? I think I do if I can. I'm trying to show you. It's, again, the sun has been coming and going today, which has been lovely, but it's gone again at the moment, which is unhelpful lighting wise. I think we could just live with just gluing that. So I want a nice little bit around the top where it's going to have to go through this curve and then just pressing it into place. That's exactly not where I said I was going to put it. How did that happen? The jar rolled. The jar rolled. Let's get that on there. And then the second one is going to layer over the top. See, that's what happened. The jar rolled. Working with circular objects. Not the easiest thing in the world because they get a life of their own. And that one into there. On this other one, I did tuck the stems up under the wire, if you can see there. But as you can see, it's not necessary. That's really beautiful. And then I think maybe as I did on this one, so I've got ones hanging from the top over here, and then I added a little cluster around the bottom here, and that's going to be lovely when the candle is shining inside. That's going to give it just a little bit of extra detailing. So do I want to do a similar thing here? Maybe that one. And this one that we carefully created. No, that's not making me happy. What about these ones? They're not quite dry. I like to give them a little dry with the heat tool. Just so I can see if I can play with another leaf or two here. Oh, I think what I might like is this one as it was, and then the little maple leaf, just adding a bit of extra colour there. Be quite nice if that was a darker leaf, maybe you. So it's creating a little cluster that just gives you happiness. Looking at some others here, thinking maybe we do want a pale one. That's quite nice. But mostly these have been quite dark autumnal leaves on these jars, and I think I want the consistency of that to carry on. I think it might be that little cluster. Or it might be that little cluster. No, let's do that. Let's just double check we don't want you the other way around. Ooh, maybe we do. Look at that, because that's got that amazing shimmer from the jack-o'-lantern on. Good. Okay, sold. So again, this is just a question of a touch of glue onto the backs of these leaves. And again, creating a little bit of additional texture, crinkling them up. This one's still a bit moist from being sprayed, but that's not going to hurt. It can dry in position, and that'll give it even more of that crinkle definition. Will just stay put. Let's tuck the other one. So you can glue the leaf or you can glue the jar. I'm thinking I want glue going in that direction and you going in that direction. That one's on slightly flimsier paper, so I'm being quite gentle about how I crinkle it. Don't want to cause too much damage. Yeah, no, I do like those blue spots. So that little one there. Very, very simple. These are coming unglued because I've done that without letting them dry. But if I put them down and stop faffing with them, they'll be able to set as we go. So I'm going to let those leaves dry because that just gives them a better chance. We could also put one further ring of this around that would just hold them in place really nicely. So wrap around one last piece of wire that's definitely going to hold those leaves, but as much as hold the leaves, which I'm not really worried about because once the glue's dry they will stay there. it's going to just tie them in the literal sense and in the artistic sense. I have, of course, not cut that quite long enough. No problem. This is not expensive wire. I think this whole roll, which is meters and meters and meters long, cost me probably less than the equivalent of $1. So let's try that again. Round it goes. And the joy of wire is you don't even need to stick it. You can just give it a little twist and we're fastened. And that just gives me some extra wire around the top. Yeah, enjoying that quite a lot. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit so that I can, well, actually, do I need to? No, it's fine. So the final little touch from the mood board, remember I mentioned the umbrella that inspired the black wire. I don't know if you can see that I've got little raindrops attached to here. Little pearly or clear glass, except they're not glass, of course, they're plastic. Raindrops, just catching the light a little bit across this jar. And they were just from a little craft store, little shake packet of clear glass drops. They're flat on the back, rounded on the top. And I just thought it was a lovely finishing touch to have those. I contemplated for a while the possibility of punching holes in the tissue paper so that where I had a clear glass drop, it would actually be a hole through the tissue paper that light would come through. In the end, I decided that the effect of that probably wouldn't be worth the amount of effort it was going to take to cut holes in the wire and in the paper and get the glass beads in the right places. The glue I'm using for this is some of my hoarded Glossy accents. I'm not sure if this is still produced because the collage medium has become such a huge success. Glossy accents is a clear glue. I know all these glues dry clear, but when I'm gluing something completely see-through like this, I like to go for the Glossy accents because I know it's going to be clear. It's got no choice. It starts clear, it ends clear, and it just gives you complete confidence in the fact that in the long run, that glass bead is going to be able to be just glass bead. So these are various sizes, and some of them behave better than others, I've discovered already in gluing them to the previous jar. It particularly isn't helpful when you get glue on yourself and then the glass bead would rather stay glued to your fingertip than stay glued to the jar. So I'm just putting these on fairly randomly, mostly over building as opposed to greenery, which I forgot with that one. Just so it's got that sense of raindrop glistening in the air as opposed to the green. I don't really want the green refracted through these. I want them on the clear parts. I suppose that's partly influenced by the fact that on the mood board that I'm creating from, the raindrops are on the clear plastic of the umbrella as opposed to hanging on greenery. So I've got that kind of sense of clear raindrops as opposed to green raindrops. Just a few of them, just to kind of, they're almost subliminal because they're so subtle when they're on here. You don't want to, do you? Yes, guilty. I talk to things as I'm crafting with them. You've heard it before, you'll hear it again. See, that one's fonder of my finger than it is of the jar. Got it, did it. Need a couple this, oh look, drip of Glossy accents. Let's pick that up while we can. So if I can get my fingertip on one of these, I'm gonna just dip it in that. And then I can stick it on. Perfect. Let go, thank you. Another of those size. I don't know if I can even manage to get these teeny tiny weeny ones on. Let go, thank you. Maybe I can manage a couple of really teeny tiny ones. I can hardly see them, never mind glue them. But we've got the Glossy accents on the mat now, might as well use it. And this is a smaller jar, so smaller beads seems appropriate. No, that one didn't want to. Let's try one more here. The right way out. It's no good trying to glue the curved bit. That's not going to stay on the jar. Need the flat side. I could use tweezers. I could try using tweezers. I've got some tweezers. Let's try tweezers. Oh, look. See, sometimes a tool is what you need. And because these are very light, the Glossy Accents is clinging as soon as I've got it on there. So they're not, once they're on, the surface tension of the glue is holding them in place. So I'm not having to worry about vanishing drops once they're on. Grand, I think that might do me. Let's wipe up this bit of Glossy Accents here. But I've used almost all that, so that's grand. These can go back in. And I think we're pretty much there. See, that really wasn't very much, was it? We might even make it into just a few minutes of fun instead of a few more minutes of fun this week, which after a couple of mammoth episodes would be a lovely thing. So now, let's just take a look at those together, because that for me is the joy, is having those two jars and how they're going to stand on the shelf. Yeah, really, really happy with those. So I'm going to gather some candles and get them all set up with their little tea lights. If you're not a fan of actual candles, who's not a fan of actual candles? But if you've got, I don't know, too many smoke alarms to be using real candles, you can of course use battery operated tea lights in these jars, but there's nothing quite like the flicker of real candlelight. So I'll be back with a couple of close-up shots of these just as they are, but then do stick around at the very end to see all of those candle jars that you saw at the beginning all lit up with their candles and flickering. I hope you've enjoyed seeing that first little foray into some candle lantern making. As I say, in the future we may have a look at some of those more mixed media type surfaces that I was creating on some of those other candle jars. If you're interested in seeing that, do let me know in the comments down below. Thank you always for your company on this creative journey. It's a joy reading your comments. Give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed that, and happy crafting all.